Welcome to the Insights to Communicate podcast with Adam Probalski, where communications, research, and strategy come together.
Jeffrey Davis, welcome to the podcast. Thanks a ton for joining. Jeffrey, you are the head, the leader, the chairman, the president of J. Davis Public Relations, and we'd love to hear about your journey. I think you started as a reporter, which is kind of not uncommon for people in the communications world, but you've been like in PR pretty much, I think, your whole career, but maybe you can correct me.
Yeah.
Those firms all look like they are PR related. And you do some other side things like edit a newsletter. And so love to hear, I guess, most specifically, your journey from, maybe you can start in college if you want, but definitely from being a reporter and how you made that jump, what seems to me pretty early on in the curve of reporters jumping to PR. I feel like it's much more of a more recent thing. So maybe you can kind of talk about being an innovator in that. So I'll have at it. Tell us your story.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. And thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'll go back to college days and my first few jobs, but I went to Ohio Wesleyan University, and I was a journalism major and involved in the newspaper, and really got my base a really good liberal arts education with journalism focus, and I wanted to get into some sort of communications career, and I didn't know what that was. A press secretary, a corporate communications person. I just didn't know. I knew I wanted to do communications, and I'm originally from outside Philadelphia, and I had met with the owner of a Philadelphia PR firm, and he said, you should go into the media and get understand how the media works, understand what deadlines are all about, understand about writing, and that'll prepare you for your jump into the corporate communications or whatever it was going to be. So that's what I did. And after graduating from OU, I worked for three daily newspapers. One in the town where the college is, the Delaware Gazette,
Okay.
a small daily newspaper. Then I wanted to get back to the East Coast, and I got a job at the Vineland Times Journal in South Jersey, and we covered my beat was anything, whatever the hot news was in New Jersey that day. I would show up, and they'd say there's an oil spill, or there's a strike, or there's the governor speaking, in Atlantic City. Whatever it was my assignment for that day. And then my third and final stop on the news paper side was I moved to Annapolis, Maryland, and I worked for the daily newspaper there called The Capital, and and that concluded my stint for about 5 or 6 years on the news side.
Sometimes the news of the day in New Jersey was the apple cider mill opened up for the season.
Yeah, yeah, you never knew. And I covered trials, and back to that early advice: get to know deadlines, get to know pressure, writing under pressure, get to know source development. All of that does apply to what you do in PR today.
Right.
So that was good advice.
That's fantastic. So speak just for a minute about making that jump. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's been, over time it's been the norm, but it seems like we're seeing a lot more of that lately as media kind of loses its budget. People jump into PR or other communications jobs. Were you unique at that time, or was that kind of a normal path?
I was. I think the my colleagues in the Capitol newsroom probably like snickered or sneered and looked at me like I was abandoning, the cause.
Right.
And so it was on the earlier side. However, these smaller papers, they are great breeding grounds for people to move up the chain. So today, a lot of those reporters are at the Washington Post, the New York Times, pretty major outlets, and they are now making that quote leap. Maybe it took them 20 years to do it, but they're now facing that. And some of them are, they don't have any choice. When you see all these layoffs, this outlet is, laid off 300 people. This one's going to lay off 200. And, communications is the logical place for them to go. But anyway, I was early. early moving on. And one reason was to advance in the news business, you had to move around the country. Like, I was
Right.
committed to the newspapers. And if I wanted to go from the capital in Annapolis to something bigger, I would have to go to a different city. And my personal life, I just, I didn't want to just keep doing that.
And you live where now?
I'm now in Northern Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C.
Okay.
But most of my career has been in Baltimore, Annapolis, and DC.
Okay. And you made that jump. It was to a PR firm, or you started something?
Yeah, the jump, I went to a company called Shannon and Lux, and it was a Washington D.C. real estate company. Shannon and Lux, a Washington D.C. real estate company. I was the director of public relations for that, and that got me more into the corporate world and understanding. At first, I thought, "Oh, what do you do? You just write press releases? How simple is that?" I had to write 2 stories a day,
Right.
dealing with people who didn't want to talk to me, and um, you know, how easy would that be? Well, you learn once you get into the business. Yeah, you have to write press releases sometimes, but there's a lot more to it, from meetings and strategy and politics and internal politics and all of that. So yeah, I started out working for a real estate company in DC.
When you say real estate, you mean
This
a
was a residential real estate company founded in 1906, and they had about 50 or 60 offices around Maryland, DC, Virginia,
wow.
and it was residential real estate. They also had a commercial arm, but I was on the residential side, and it really, my job was to go to the different offices and help the realtors understand marketing and
Huh.
things that they could do to promote their businesses.
It's funny. I use realtors as an example all the time because a lot of people have an angle. And regardless of your business, there's always going to be some angle to get some press if that's what you're looking for. But realtors are famously kind of self promoters, and yet it's really hard for them to get press because there's just nothing interesting you can really say as the realtor for this part of town. It's just there's not going to it's going to be hard, and they're always like very whenever every time I talk to them, and I know a lot of them, they're always like, "How do I get like press like you do?" And it's like, yeah, it's just you don't have anything interesting to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And back then, there were more media outlets and more local papers. So if think of 50 or 60 offices, each one of those had a local weekly, or there were more options, and that's true in PR and media generally. Um, when I was a reporter at the Capitol and I would go to a press conference, I would be sitting next to somebody from the Baltimore Sun, the Baltimore Evening Sun, which was separate,
Right.
the Baltimore News American, the Washington Post, the local radio station, and maybe two other outlets. Later, I mean, or now, if you went to a press conference in that area, you may have two or one outlet, or nobody shows up. So it's really changed.
Yeah. I live in Irvine, California. So the Orange County Register had a bureau there. And of course, the SAC-B and LA Times. I'm not sure if any of them have a bureau there. Maybe LA Times might not even have a reporter in DC. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a good description of what it's like today. Early in my career, we had all the different options and all kinds of media, and now not only have a lot of those outlets shut down, the poor people that are still there, they're just getting hammered with um, outreach, and number two, their job is to cover the hottest, most dramatic story, not something that a PR person may be pitching as a positive story. They have to cover whatever the hottest most dramatic story is.
Yeah.
So it makes it hard for the PR people.
So take us to today. What does your business look like as far as size and focus and your favorite kind of project?
Yeah. So after working for the real estate company, I worked for two or three of the larger ad agencies in the market, and I was always in the PR department of those agencies. So that really got me to understand, how PR fits into the overall marketing mix, and I was working for some big companies, and we were Pfizer and um, some of the larger corporations on the East Coast. So I really got to understand that, and then I wanted to move on to out on my own. So I wanted to move out on my own. So what I did was set my own consultancy up, J Davis Public Relations. And what happened was these agencies that don't have a PR capability would hire me.
Ah,
So I would have, and that's still true to this day. If an ad agency needs that capability, they can bring me on and use me as long as needed, and then on a project basis. So that's what I'm doing mostly now. It's me, and I have a number of my own accounts, and they're all over the place. It's but mostly business to business. So a lot in the real estate field.
okay.
I'm doing a national law firm that specializes in catastrophe insurance cases, and that's around the country. And what else? I do crisis work that pops up here and there. You can't really plan for that, but I'm the person you call when there's some major crisis. I can come in and lead you through that. So I've had some interesting cases over the years where I've done that. So right now I'm also doing a project for a PR firm in Cincinnati for a major transportation project, and I'm doing the specifically the social media aspect of that. And I didn't really touch on this yet, but back in 2007, when social media was really bubbling up, and what was called Twitter was gaining popularity, I was one of the first people in Maryland to have a Twitter account, and the reason it hit me almost like it's an AP wire service. With you look at it, there's a stream of content that either the media is putting out there, or people are making observations and putting out there. And to me, that felt like the AP wire. And so I latched onto it and became known as an early adopter who would guide companies through social media. So Boeing hired me to help uh, some of their divisions, get up to speed on social media. Hair Cuttery, I started their Facebook page. News Corp, the Wall Street Journal's parent, had me do some advising on how to. Actually, they had just purchased MySpace and wanted to know what should we do with that, and I put together a recommendation on that. So I was an early adopter and speaker on the topic of social media, and I continue to do that. And so this project in Cincinnati, I'm focused specifically on social media, the content, the strategy. Should we get on Blue Sky? What about Threads? How do we change our messaging for Instagram? We just launched LinkedIn, and you can't just create content and then say let's put it on all five
Right.
platforms. It's got to be specific to them. So anyway, that's how I operate. I have my own clients, but also companies and agencies will hire me as well.
So go back for a second to the PR work at ad agencies. Because to me, obviously, big companies, big ad agencies have, I think, a lot of different components to them. But any ad agency that I typically work with, they're buying media or they're doing the creative. They tend to be kind of segmented and focusing on that sort of work. So, what's the role of the comms guy, the PR guy in an advertising agency?
Yeah, it's to listen for news. So the difference is that ad people are very, and that's their job, very promotional, and you know it's more marketing and promotions and all that, which is what they should be doing.
Right.
And the PR person, especially with a journalistic background, newspaper background, I'm listening for what's what's the news here? Is it a major advance in the product? Is it what would grab the interest of a reporter from the trade press forever, for example?
Right.
And then not only that, I know how to package the story that would appeal to this, the reporter at the whatever trade press or mainstream media,
Yeah.
and package it in a way that would be of interest to them. If a quote advertising person did it, it would be very promotional. It would be a turnoff, and they could tell that you're just trying to sell. You're just trying to get a free ad. The PR person can massage it and work the story so it has news value. So I always joke that though that in these meetings with the clients, 80% of the meeting is about the media buy and the creative and all that, and then PR is right at the bottom of the agenda just before other. I'll usually have like 5 minutes to wedge in what I want to say, but once they see how it works, it's very valuable, and they're very appreciative of what the PR. And when the other thing with PR is PR, a lot of people think PR means press, references press releases. PR is much bigger than that. It's messaging, crisis, and strategy and all that. But a lot of times it does boil down to media relations.
That makes a lot of sense. They're slick and you're more personable.
Yeah, I'm the yeah. I have to be less slick, more just like a rugged old rumpled up newspaper reporter.
Right.
Um,
That's great. Much more relatable. Makes sense. So along this journey, along the way, you've been doing this for a couple decades or more. Have you had a mentor or mentors that guided you? I know you mentioned that PR guy, when you're still in school, but is there anybody else along the way that
Yeah,
really?
I have two come to mind. One is Hal Donofrio. So I worked for an ad agency in Baltimore called Richardson, Myers, and Donofrio. There was no Richardson, there was no Myers, but it was Hal Donofrio, and he was the kind of like the Mad Men era, um, ad guy, and he had close relationships with the governor and different politicians, and we had some of the better accounts. We helped. Um, um, some pretty high profile projects in Maryland, but it was some of the associates there. Back then they were old to me. They were in their 50s or 60s maybe, and I thought they were just these old guys. But they were from that Mad Men era of how ad agencies were in the 60s and 70s, and so I was the young guy, not quite learning from them, but just observing them. So I learned a lot from that experience. The other one was Ralph Crosby. He started a PR firm in Annapolis 50 years ago. I just attended their 50th anniversary, and he has the same background as me. He was a reporter, and he started a PR firm, and now it's one of the largest PR and ad agencies in Baltimore and Washington, according to the Washington Business Journal and the Baltimore Business Journal.
Hmm.
And I just learned, from him, just ethics and the just good business practices, and it's a highly respected organization. So those are two. The core one for me though was my professor at Ohio Wesleyan, Vern Edwards, who trained. We have some great colleagues that he had trained, who've gone to some major publications, and he's the one that set the stage for what I think was a good career.
Very cool. I love those stories because most of us have them,
Mm.
and most of us wouldn't be where we are without someone taking that moment in time to help us out. So I'm a big fan of doing that for other people.
Yeah, it's a good lesson that reach out to the person that was in our shoes years ago, and
Yeah.
you may think there's nothing to it, but they're listening to every word you say, and they're learning.
Yeah.
So I love doing that kind of thing.
So you are a contributor, editor of Capital Communicator. I guess it's largely online,
Yeah.
a news outlet or blog or whatever you can describe it, but really focuses in on the industry itself and maybe multiple because you've got information on marketing, advertising, PR, media, digital, all that sort of thing. How were you involved there, and what's behind Capital Communicator?
Yeah, it's Capital Communicator, capitalcommunicator.com. It's entirely online, and it's promoted as like the go-to resource for communicators across the board. There's a lot of uh, government uh, communicators who read it, associations. Um, its core area is Richmond, Virginia, to north, almost Philadelphia, but definitely Washington D.C.
Right.
And it's an online publication or outlet, and stories are posted every single day.
Yeah.
Some of it is original, and some of it is pulling together sources from other outlets, and it's like it's a combination. We recently recruited some people to serve as columnists for it, but we promote campaigns, people, and again, it takes the place. In the old days, the Washington Business Journal and the Baltimore Business Journal had reporters assigned to marketing and advertising. They were
Right.
my go-tos. Well, they don't exist anymore. Um, so I serve as the Maryland editor. So my job is to seek out any kind of news or campaigns or hires or anything, obituaries, and then we have the publisher is Paul Dooning, and then there's an editor, Phil Rabin in D.C., and they oversee everything. So it's a good resource. The other thing they do is a conference every year called the I just changed the name. It's now the Mid Atlantic Marcom Summit,
Okay.
and it's usually lately it's been in Northern Virginia, and they just had one a few months ago, and had about 400 people there, and it was so it's conference online, and then there's sponsorships, hard news. It's a good resource, and the who's who of at least the East Coast, or at least that part of the East Coast. Is familiar with it.
I always tell people that, like, if you want to get into an industry, like, look at industry news, look at those kind of publications, look at those aggregators, because you get a pretty good idea of what it looks like, what hiring looks like, what firing looks like, which is happening this week, right, with the merger. And it's a great look behind the scenes of any industry. And so it's kind of fun. It's kind of,
Exactly. Yeah, we'll go deeper. I'll seek out press releases that a company has put out there. Now, if they can squeeze a story in somewhere else, they may get two lines.
right.
But I'll pump the whole thing into the story, and with photos and everything. So, and then that gives them this is my thing. That gives them content that they can then share to their audiences through LinkedIn. My recommended strategy is get your story somewhere. Capital Communicator, if it's a communication story, or in I use a thing called City Biz List, and they have um, outlets around the country, and get a story in some place like that. It doesn't matter if it's pay for play or not, and then build your LinkedIn audience, and then get stories like that placed, and then ship your those stories out to your followers on LinkedIn. I think that's the ideal strategy. Build your own list, build your own audience, and then feed them either original content that you write or content that you can get placed like through publicity.
Yeah, third-party validators are in a lot of, I mean, unless you're in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, third-party validator is a third-party validator. Get it somewhere living under someone else's banner and you can use it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then the other thing that I've been involved in lately is the National Press Club. I'm on their communicators team, and recently I was appointed to their Meet the Media series. So it's a really interesting position for me, matching the media with communicators.
Ah,
And so, so right now, what I'm doing is, and traditionally this committee's been in existence for decades. So it's an honor to be on the committee and also running the Meet the Media series
Yeah.
for an organization like the National Press Club. But in the past, it's always been Meet the Media has been meet the bureau chief, the CBS bureau chief from Washington bureau,
Right.
or things like that. I'm shifting it to, and I'm taking a cue from the recent presidential campaign where there's all this talk about niche media
Oh, yeah.
and podcasts. Everybody's talking about the Joe Rogan interview or the interviews with podcasts most people had not heard of
Right.
from the mainstream. And so I'm going to take a hard look at podcasts and what are some podcasts and podcast hosts we need to communicators need to know about. Speaking on a podcast.
Yeah. Or even these, I mean, I don't know if TikTok lives past January 19, but there's these talking heads on there where a lot of people get their news. They just like, come on, breaking news. They tell you a story for 30 seconds. And those people have power because they've got, 200,000 people watching them.
Exactly.
You can fight it all you want. If someone wants to fight the trends of media, you can. But if you want to embrace it, then you're going to talk to the guy who's got 50,000 people watching him.
Right. And what's interesting to me is there's one, I'm not coming up with his name right now, but he has maybe 1 million followers on TikTok. But he's not the one out there digging up.
Right.
He's not walking through the halls of Congress or calling people. He's aggregating, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He's got 1 million people listening, and they trust his delivery.
Right.
And that's you need to be connect with him.
Yep.
You need to find your industry's version of Joe Rogan. You're not going to get on Oprah Winfrey's podcast or Joe Rogan's, all that, but go a couple levels down.
Yeah.
And find that. And the other thing, in part of public relations is media training, where you train execs on how to deliver a soundbite in a media interview. Well, today, if you're going to go the podcast route, your soundbite's going to be good. That's 7 seconds worth of an hour-long interview.
Yeah.
You need to understand how to keep it lively and engaging and informative for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. That's a skill.
Without sticking your foot in your mouth, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a much more casual environment, so you tend to feel more casual.
Exactly.
All right, so let's wrap with your words of wisdom, your mantra, the one thing that rings in your head on a daily basis.
It's remain curious, be a consumer of media. Don't just say, what's all this TikTok stuff? That's just for kids. Find, experience it and make your own judgment. Is Blue Sky, the next X or not?
Right.
Go dive in and play with it and see. So experience it, be a consumer of the media, and and then you can, advise your clients accordingly. And the other one is keep it short. That's nobody wants anything longer, and they're probably waiting for our interview to conclude. And it's true. So, but there's a skill in getting your message across succinctly. It's still interesting and delivers the message.
Awesome, Jeff. Thanks a ton for joining. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
This has been Insights to Communicate with Adam Probalski, president of the woman and Latina-owned market and opinion research firm, Probalski Research.